Shalom uvracha from Yerushalayim, Ir HaKodesh. In our second Haftarah series, we study this evening the Haftarah of Parshat Ki-Tavo. This is the parasha of the Torah, which begins with a description of the Jewish people entering Eretz Yisrael, instructions for the time when they will enter the land. V'haya Ki-Tavo el haaretz. And interestingly enough, the Haftarah, taken from the book of Isaiah, together with the other prophecies of consolation of Israel and Jerusalem, also speaks, the Haftarah speaks about the return of the Jewish people to the land of Israel. One of my favorite chapters, chapter 60 of Isaiah. We read the entire chapter. Those people who want to follow the text. Really beautiful, beautiful reading. Very exciting descriptions here about the future of Eretz Yisrael, the future of Yerushalayim. Kumi Ori! Arise and shine. The great light of Eretz Yisrael, the great light of Yerushalayim. Kvod Hashem alayich zarach. I'm reading sentence 1. Ki ba'orech, the time has come for the light of Israel, the light of Jerusalem to shine. And even if there is great darkness in the world, in sentence 2 here, Kinei hachoshech yichase eretz va'arafel lu'umim, even if the whole world is covered with clouds of darkness, va'alayich yizrach Adonai u'chvodo alayich yireh, but upon you will shine the glory of God. And the light will be so strong, the light of Eretz Yisrael, the light of Yerushalayim will be so great, that this light will illuminate the entire world. V'halachu goyim la'orech u'melachim l'noga zachech. All the kings and all of the nations, all of the different members of the human race, the nations and the kings will all be able to follow in the glory of the light of the shining splendor of Israel and Jerusalem. It's so beautiful to read this here in Yerushalayim. I'm sure it's beautiful to read it anywhere in the world. It's a very, very inspiring chapter. I'm always moved when I read sentence 4, if you're following in the text, chapter 60, verse 4. Si saviv einayich u're'i. Raise up your eyes. Lift up your eyes and just look around. Kulam nikbetzu ba'ulach. Do you see how they've all been gathered back to you? Banayich mirachok yavo u'benotayich altzat te'amana. I had the privilege, Baruch Hashem, to read these sentences outside of Israel before we came to the Holy Land, before God gave us the special privilege and special blessing of being able to live in Yerushalayim. And we read this, and we read it with great faith, but to be able to experience it. I was thinking this afternoon, in preparation for tonight's discussion, how many decades, how many centuries, millennia, how long have they been reading these words about the Jews gathering back to Israel? Pick up your eyes and look all around. Well, I mean, for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, they would pick up their eyes and they would not see all the Jews, all the sons and all the daughters coming back to Eretz Yisrael and to Yerushalayim. But with the great grace of God, with the great blessing of our generation, all we have to do is pick up our eyes. We have mentioned in a previous Haftarah study that this idea of raising your eyes, lift up your eyes and look all around. What do you have to pick up your eyes for? What does it mean to raise your eyes? I think it means you have to look carefully into it. Because it could be that everybody around here, everybody in Israel, everybody in Jerusalem sees, Baruch Hashem, millions of Jews. May the entire Jewish nation arrive immediately. Millions and millions of Jews. Everyone sees countless numbers of tens of millions, if not more, of Gentiles who have visited Eretz Yisrael. So everybody should see it. Maybe Isaiah is saying you have to pick up your eyes to really study the phenomenon, to really understand the depth of what's happening right in front of our eyes. It's so beautiful, it's so exciting to be part of this process. My favorite sentence, if I'm allowed to choose one, the Gemara says you're not allowed to say one sentence is beautiful and one sentence is not so beautiful. I love the entire text of the entire Tanakh. I'm very close to chapter 60, but my favorite verse is chapter 60, verse 8, the pasuk of the Haftarah, which I most feel is Perek Samach, pasuk Het. And I'll tell you why I'm so connected to this pasuk. Because this is the pasuk wherein I see that each of the people sitting here, each of the people sitting here and living here and visiting here, they seem to be all living testimony to the fulfillment of this great, great prophecy, this mysterious prophecy of sentence 8. Let me read it to you in Hebrew and then try to at least paraphrase it in English, if not translate. Mi eile ka'av te'ufena. The prophet speaks about the Jewish people flying back to Israel. Ka'av, av with an ayin. I apologize for my pronunciation. I was brought up in an Ashkenazic background. I love all the Ashkenazim. I tried studying with Sfaradim. I tried studying with Teimanim, and I know I do not properly yet know how to pronounce an ayin, but I'm working on it. The word av in this sense is not av with an aleph. Av with an aleph means a father. Av with an ayin means ka'av to ufena. They will fly like the clouds. They will fly with the clouds. And Isaiah, this is not Derush. We're not learning here expanded levels of understanding. We're not learning midrashic interpretations. I'm reading the text, and you're welcome to read it on your own. See if you come to a different conclusion. Who are these people? Flying like the clouds, returning to Israel like the doves, like the pigeons that come back to their nests, to their cold windows. Where'd they come from? How'd they get here? Almost every person that I know, especially over the last 60, 70 years, almost every person that I know that lives here in Israel today, that was not born in Israel, arrived in Israel through the fulfillment of this prophecy. Mi'ela ka'avtu ufena, Baruch Hashem. That's how I got here. That's how you got here. That's most of us arrived here. The question is, those people who are not yet fully convinced of the validity of the sanctification of the prophecies of the Bible, I'd like to know how they understand this. This was written a few thousand years ago. A few thousand years ago, there's a prophecy that the Jewish people will fly back to Israel. You know the Hebrew word av, ayin bet, which means some kind of cloud, some kind of moving, flying cloud, is phonetically connected to the Hebrew word for flying. Ayin bet, which is a cloud, is connected to ayin pei, like la'uf, te'ufena. Ayin bet and ayin pei, pei and bet and pei are interchangeable in Hebrew. The letters bet, vav, mem, pei are interchangeable. Rav and af, very similar sounds. A bet and a pei are interchangeable letters. They will fly back. That's the word that's used. It's still the word that's used today in the airport. When we arrive in the airport in Ben Gurion Airport to greet everyone, we hope to see all of the people who are so inspired by Isaiah 60, verse 8. They want to get on the next plane and fly here to be part of this great process. The way we refer to the airport in Hebrew, everyone knows, is Sdei HaTe'ufa. That's the same word. Te'ufena. That's the biblical word. That's the biblical. And I don't know if there is a sign in Ben Gurion Airport. If there is none, and I humbly suggest that there should be one, a very large sign, welcoming everyone. And maybe there should be this great dedication to Isaiah 60, verse 8. Maybe everyone should feel as they're arriving in Eretz Yisrael, wow, this is what Yeshayahu spoke about. We just got off a flight. We just got off the plane, flying to Israel. Who ever heard about flying? If you study the commentaries, study the early commentaries, the latter commentaries, what does this mean? Is it talking about some miraculous event of supernatural phenomena? Does it mean an exaggeration? Does it mean they will arrive in Israel hurriedly? But we know what it means. Those of us who have been privileged to see airplanes, those of us who have been privileged to be in airports, those of us who understand historically that without any pun intended, the Wright brothers came along at the right time. I mean, they Came along at a perfect time, as the Jewish people are getting ready to come back to the Holy Land of Israel. This tremendous phenomenon, unparalleled in world history. Aviation breakthroughs. They're flying. And that parallels the whole Zionistic concept of, let's get back to Israel. So is that coincidental? Or is that incidental? Is that part of God's process? Is that what it says here? No, I'm serious. That's what we're reading. That's what we're reading. Now, to many of us, getting on an airplane is okay. It's a natural process. We sit on an airplane the same way we sit on a bus, the same way we sit on a train, the same way we sit in the car. I'm not saying there aren't miraculous aspects to that as well, but do we ever think?
You see a correlation that at the same time they started the Zionist movement to Israel is when they discovered.
That's what I'm saying. I think that's what it means. That's what it means. They're going to fly.
Leonardo da Vinci knew about this 500 years before.
Why wasn't it developed? Right?
He was a genius, and these guys made a mistake. Yeah.
God opened up a certain level of understanding to help, and that's what it means. That's what it means. A few thousand years ago, Isaiah spoke of aviation. Isaiah spoke about flying to Eretz Yisrael. Do we sit on the airplane very excitedly as we're flying through the clouds and over the clouds and with the clouds? Are we excited? Do we fly? Maybe on every El Al flight there should be some kind of quotation from Isaiah. What? I think it would be very beautiful. Maybe we should have this in mind. And maybe as we're sitting on airplanes flying to Eretz Yisrael, we should realize that this was long ago spoken of. And we are part of that dream, of the fulfillment of the words of God. That indeed our nation is returning to Eretz Yisrael. Indeed our nation is returning to Yerushalayim. Indeed they're flying back. Now, theoretically, if there would be no such means of transportation, how many millions of Jews would be cut off from the opportunity? Yes, there are boats, there are ships. You can get here, with many months of travel, with many travails and many difficulties. What a great blessing of God for the first time in world history. As the pigeons and as the doves fly back, so too we fly back to our particular nests. So too we fly back to the Holy Land of Eretz Yisrael. And we are excited. Sitting here in Eretz Yisrael, sitting here in Yerushalayim, on the very Torah section. Remember, the Torah section is the section of Parshat Ki-Tavo el haaretz, and the Haftarah of that particular week is Mi'ela Ka'av Ta'ufena. They will all be flying like the clouds. We look forward to greeting everyone. I think there should be a greeting committee each and every day. Maybe there is. Maybe I haven't seen it yet. There should be people greeting everyone who takes upon himself, takes upon herself the fulfillment of the great commandment of living in Eretz Yisrael, the great opportunity, the great privilege of living in Eretz Yisrael. The rabbis teach, Shkula mitzvat yishuv Eretz Yisrael, keneged kol ha-mitzvot Shabbat Torah. The great level of the fulfillment of the great commandment of living in the land of God. How beautiful, how blessed is our generation, the first generation in history, world history, over the last century or so, that we are privileged to see the fulfillment of so many of the prophecies of Isaiah and the other prophets. As we've seen the beginning steps of the fulfillment, we pray together we should be able to experience immediately the total concepts of world redemption, of Tikkun Olam, of Mashiach, and Bezrat Hashem. For all those people who don't yet believe in the words of the prophets, maybe as they study more and more the texts, maybe our eyes will be opened to a greater level of insight onto the miraculous phenomena of the prophetic messages of God as are stated openly and expressly in our sacred texts. I do hope that we should study this Haftarah as all Haftarot, not merely as a statement of the past, but as a current events topic. Lift up our eyes, look all around, and see all the sons and all the daughters of the Jewish nation together with all the other nations all joining together here in the Holy Land and in the Holy City. Thank you so much for listening. Shalom Uvracha.